Ladies and gentlemen, throughout this recording, throughout this whole session, we have noted from time to time that the internet does cut in and cut out occasionally. So if there is some lag time, we do apologize for it. And to make up for that, you will all receive a copy of this session as well, so you can go back through it at your own time and get a better idea of what we're talking about. So without further ado, let's start the program and start enlightening you on our subject today, which is innovative leadership and how psychological safety drives performance in the workplace. But before we get into that, I'd like to introduce to you Iron Mindsets. Who are we? Well, we're an organization that focuses on three key areas: consulting, corporate training, and coaching and mentoring. So we aim to bring you a set of tools, set of techniques, a set of processes that you can use to enhance the way your organization does business. Obviously, we're here today to talk about how 360-degree feedback enables psychological safety within the workplace and how that impacts innovation as well. When I first started learning about psychological safety and innovation and its connectedness to 360, I spent a long time discussing it with our guest this afternoon. He enlightened me on how psychological safety is a key element of success in modern business and why it's so important. With over 30 years of experience in helping organizations find the true gaps in their human capital development, interpreting more than 100,000 individual feedback forms and surveys from around the world, and delivering feedback to some of the largest multinational blue chip organizations around the world, he's equipped and ready to give us an in-depth interview into the power of feedback and how organizations and coaches can use 360 to remove ambiguity, develop long-term development pathways, and I think prove the highest return on investment. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd all like to join me in giving a virtual round of applause to Lieven Cornelis. Lieven, thank you for joining us today. It's my pleasure. Thank you. Lieven, please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Okay, I'm a psychologist from educational background, and since ever I finished my university studies, I've been working in the field of, let's say, the crossroad between people and organizations. So I always love to help organizations to deal better with people and people to deal better with organizations. I've been doing research, I've been doing training, coaching, development sessions, setting up systems in organizations. So I like to look at the intersection people and organization from the most diverse perspectives. And that's what I want to share with you.
Fantastic. I think, I mean, we've got a lot to learn from you today. I know that we've got this is a huge subject matter with multiple things to cover. So look, without further ado, let's get into this. Let's discover a little bit more. To begin with, for the people who haven't been in one of these sessions before, can you give us a quick overview of what is 360? What's it all about?
Right. So 360 in the classical way is a system, a process to invite people around one person, around the manager most of the time, a leader, which is called the self. It's a word that is pretty common. So the self, the manager, invites the people around him or her to get feedback on a certain set of behaviors. And this includes the N+1, so the hierarchical higher level, the peers, the subordinates, eventually also in sales, for example, the customers, but it also may be internal services. So basically all people who have a pretty good idea how one person, the self, is acting and behaving. And you're asking questions in a structured way and a very concise way. And then you consolidate all the information in one report. which is then to be discussed with a third person.
So, I mean, so why is it important? Why is 360 important to do?
360 is mainly used for development. Sometimes it's used for performance. I will not go into that today, but that's the wrong usage. So it's mainly, let's say, as a start for self-awareness, as a start for, as a diagnosis tool, you may call it, for understanding oneself, how people look at you at this moment as a self, and which paths for development one can put together and ask and put in public to say.
So it sounds very comprehensive. I mean, obviously there's a lot more that we could go into now, but let's put that to one side because we're here today to talk about the subject of psychological safety, and a lot's been written about it very recently too. Could you give us an overview? What is psychological safety, and well, I mean, who is behind psychological safety, and why is it so important for leadership within organizations?
Well, the key element of the key elements of psychological safety are the feeling free to speak up, to share both worries, ideas, and hopes. So it's both the negative side as the positive side. Expressing a worry, for example, a nurse would express a worry to a surgeon for overdose of medication, which she assumes or she worries that maybe it's too much, and maybe the hospital, the surgeon is tired or whatever, not putting notice enough to the doses. So that's expressing a worry. But it can also be, when it comes to innovation, expressing ideas and feeling free to fail.
So where does psychological safety start within an organization?
Well, it's all over the organization, and of course there is this top-down idea that as a leader it should start with the leader, of course. It has to do with operational people also who feel free to speak up and to improve, but also to indicate whether there's maybe some worry, some problem. The concept has been first introduced by Amy Edmondson, a Harvard professor, and since then more and more studies and publications are in the field on this domain of psychological safety. And so there is this concept of murmuration, meaning that when there is a large number of birds flying, the first two and then the next four, they will decide when they change the course, the full flock will follow, the group of birds will follow. So whether you're a leader of a large organization, such as Procter & Gamble or whatever the organization is, very large global organization, or you're just a leader of a 5-people team, it doesn't make any difference. When you as a leader set the scene for the psychological safety, other people will start following you. And so then you set the scene, to say, you really create an atmosphere wherein people feel free to speak up.
Well, I think that prompts a question, which would be, how do we set the scene for psychological safety, or how is psychological safety created in the workplace?
Well, it's created by, first of all, listening in a genuine way. When people in the organizations, of course, fail to listen in a genuine way, they may miss out on chances, but they risk also not to listen to very valuable criticism or worries. There is, for example, a very known incident, or rather accident, so an incident that led to an accident of the Apollo 13, where an engineer was looking at the images 2 days before the Apollo 13 would be launched. So there was a kind of pre-launch, and he saw that some piece close to the fuel, some piece was thrown out of that part of the missile, but he was not 100% sure that he really saw what he saw was correct. So he asked his superior to get access to satellite images, which the NASA has access to if they have good reasons to. But the superior, he just simply refused it. He said, you're not in the, you don't have the hierarchical level to demand for it. Well, he did, so he refused it. And 2 days later, the Apollo 13 exploded exactly for the reason that this engineer wanted to check out. He was for 90% sure, but he could not have, let's say, postpone the launch because of this only 90%, it should be 100%, and he did not have the hierarchical level to really postpone it. So that's where a small incident can become a large accident by not having this psychological safety in place, and so the person was not listened to. And that's happening all over the world at every time. So if people really feel not only listened to, but also something is happening with what they express, then you create psychological safety.
So is it possible for someone to maybe like take the temperature, or is psychological safety measurable? Can we measure the psychological safety within an organization?
Absolutely, you can measure it. We have at this moment standard in the different 360 questionnaires that we use. We have a standard set of 15 questions measuring psychological safety, indicating whether the people feel listened to, the people feel free to speak up. And very important also, the manager, the self, as I said before, takes time to study the failures, when they fail something, what can be taken out, not to blame a person, but to understand the lesson and to understand what action should be taken in the future. And so then, so it can indeed be measured. And if you think about Pixar, for example, which is one of the most successful animation movies makers in the world, probably the most successful ever, they have put in place, they have set a scene for it. So, for example, if you are the owner of the new movie to come, then after, let's say, 20–30% of the movie is ready, there is a panel of experts, internal experts, senior people, junior people, who will look into the movie, who will look at the movie, at the phase he is, and start with criticizing it in a very constructive way. So they don't criticize the person, the owner, they criticize the movie, the scenario, the characters, the flow, etc. Always with the idea to make it even better. So they also come with suggestions. And every time some part is ready, let's say 50%, 70%, whatever, there is a new discussion panel coming up with new ideas and everything. So basically the top of Pixar, they claim that the movie, when it's halfway, it just sucks. And then they break it down and they restart and they continue this process until they really have an outstanding movie. So they say themselves, every movie at the start is a bad movie. But then by having the psychological safety in place where the owner is listening to all this constructive criticism and suggestions and doing something with it, that leads to an outstanding, outperforming movie.
Does this then also have an impact? Because it sounds very similar to working in an agile way.
Can you repeat the question, David? Sorry.
This sounds like it would also have an impact, like psychological safety, if you were working within an agile team as well.
Absolutely. I mean, agile business project can simply not be successful without psychological safety. And in agile world, you have this 3 or 4 weeks time slots that is used all the time. Every 3-4 weeks, the work done is analyzed, the work to be done is defined. And during these meetings, it's extremely important to put in place this psychological safety, because you want to know what went wrong, why it went wrong, how you can improve it. And if people feel comfortable speaking up, discussing what went wrong, coming up with new ideas, then this agile can work. Without psychological safety, agile will not work. It's very simple.
We this sounds very, very similar to something we were discussing earlier. Let me think. Ray Dalio employs his technique of radical truthfulness at Bridgewater Consultants. Is that psychological safety?
It will be psychological safety for those who can stand it. But the fact
that that's an interesting turn of phrase, for those who can stand it. What does that mean?
Well, it's a kind of paradox. Radical truthfulness is, of course, a beautiful desire, and some people really can stand being treated so radical, so blunt, and so getting criticism in a very direct way. The fact that the attrition rate of the newcomers is extremely high indicates that this is very difficult for most people to deal with it. So yes, it's psychological safety, and no, it's not for all. If you are a vulnerable person, you can't stand it. And so that's the reason why criticism always should be on the product, on the behavior also, and never on the person. But that's easy said, but quite a number of people have difficulty making that difference, and they feel criticism as personal. So there is this kind of empathetic side missing in Dalio's approach, which he deliberately is missing out. It's no problem. I mean, all people are aware of it. So in psychological safety, there is this empathetic side, understanding how you deal with people, and respectful.
So then it's all about how the feedback is given.
How the feedback is given, the method used for the feedback is really extremely important. And that's the reason why I like 360, because that's a structured way. It's a way that people can understand. It's purely behavior focused. And then with the help of a good feedback giver, people really come to understanding how they can grow better, how can they develop themselves. So psychological safety is a kind of symbiosis with 360.
Interesting, because it seems like there's a symbiosis with innovation as well when it comes to psychological safety. But before we move into that, let's move into innovation, because that's partly why we're here today as well. Is what do you believe the current situation that we've been going through has taught us about innovation?
Well, innovation will definitely even be more important in the future, the near future to come. And I strongly believe that mankind is capable of dealing with it and to come. And every crisis has shown that people come up with new ideas that enrich everything. So it will be more difficult, of course, because of the social distance, because of the online dealing with other people. So that will definitely have a major impact. But underlying is this psychological safety, which is a cornerstone for innovation. People can only bring up new ideas when they feel safe enough to bring it up.
Also, I was going to ask you is, yeah, how does psychological safety increase innovations within these organizations?
But psychological safety has to do with both sides. It's the person bringing up the idea or giving the criticism, and the other people then listening to it and receiving it. So self-awareness is an extremely important element for innovation, because if your ego stands in the way of your listening, you're not capable of guiding innovation to success. And so that's the reason why psychological safety is a key for innovation, because if people really feel up of speaking up and bringing up new ideas and giving criticism on ideas that are launched, but not on the person, but on the reason why. So the listening and the capturing information and dealing with something is very important.
You say listening. Is that active listening?
Ah! I hate this word.
Nobody was expecting that reaction. What's wrong with active listening? Tell me.
Active listening is a paradox. It's basically if you're listening, then you're not active. You're active in processing information, but active listening is most ugly and stupid combinations of words possible. So let me explain. If you're really listening, you try to understand what the person is saying, you're trying to deal with it, you process it, and then you can come back with your answer, whether you accept this new idea or not. But very important in psychological safety is that if you don't accept an idea, that you explain why, that you can ground it, so that the person does feel that his or her idea is welcome and is treated with interest. So listening is very important, even more than talking, let's say. But talking, of course, has to be balanced with the listening, because you need to explain afterwards why you do such things, why you are capturing the idea or the worry.
We asked the question before of psychological safety, so I must do the same thing of innovation. Is can innovation be measured?
Well, definitely innovation can be measured by the outcome, by the output. The way to innovation is something that can be measured in different steps. And then the output, of course, whether it's different to the existing and it's really making a major difference, that is the output. So yes, it can.
And then so then how does feedback then help to drive innovation?
Well, feedback is apart from psychological safety is another cornerstone, because you may think of yourself that you're creating this psychological safety. Let me go back to an example I lived myself. I did work with two young people one moment in time, two young psychologists, very sharp, both of them. The first one, a more sequential thinking person, the other one, a more intuitive thinking person, who captures my ideas very quickly. The more sequential person had difficulty, but at the end, she really came up with very good ideas, strong and well grounded. She left after, let's say, something like 2 years, which is a normal time for a youngster. But she then told me, and that was really hard for me to take, she told me that she had a feeling in discussions, she literally said, you made me feel stupid, which was no intention of mine at all, at any moment. And I really appreciated and respected her. But the fact that I made her feeling stupid by moments, made her not feeling comfortable of speaking up and coming up with ideas that maybe not 100% done, finished. So this feedback was extremely important. And in a 360, for example, you will get this kind of feedback in a structured way.
You mentioned before that there's obviously the symbiosis with 360 and psychological safety, and then also the symbiosis between psychological safety and innovation as well. I think you've mentioned it before. I think it would be a good thing to talk about now would be you mentioned how P&G has been, Procter and Gamble has been a leader in innovation and in setting the scene for psychological safety.
Yes, Procter and Gamble is really putting a lot of effort in training people, in setting the scene as a leader in psychological safety, and they are really excellent in the meaning, in the sense that they can bring together psychological safety and high performance standards. So all people know in Procter and Gamble that they really have to outperform the customers' expectations, and at the same time they can speak up freely. They can come up with worries, with ideas. They take a lot of time to learn from the failures. The former CEO even has written a book about his major failures, because he said that was even more important than where I succeeded, the lessons taking out. And so Procter & Gamble, as well as other organizations where innovation is key, they put a lot of efforts in creating, in setting the scene of psychological safety. Google also, for example, has done a lot of research internally, which teams are the most successful ones, and are internally outperforming other ones. And there was one key element that stood out, and that was psychological safety. The moment that in a team psychological safety rules to say, set the standard, then the progress is substantially higher than where the ego of the leader, for example, stands in its way, when there is no listening, when there is frightening.
Does that then does that come with maturity of the leader, or is it something that can be taught?
It's something that can be taught. I don't know, probably some leaders have it by nature. Other people need to be trained, so it's trainable. First of all, you need to understand why it is important, and there are enough examples, described examples, why when psychological safety failed and it led to catastrophes. The most known is Fukushima, the explosion, the nuclear explosion in Japan, which was directly linked to psychological safety, because the man who came up with, every time that people came up with questions about the eventual tsunami, they were laughed away. And so the result, of course, I don't need to explain. So yes, I forgot your question. Sorry.
Is this something that leaders can learn, or does it only come from experience?
No, it's no mystery. It's not an inborn gift. It's really something that, of course, some people have it as a gift, but it's trainable, it's measurable, and people can develop it.
Does innovation become harder now that we are more remote? We're working apart now. We're working from home, and we're practicing physical distancing. So how is that impacting innovation?
I assume studies within 10 years from here will of course learn more, but I assume that it will be a different way to deal with innovation. Some people need the interaction, but of course now it will shift to a remote. I think that's a shift that has started some 30 years ago, and that is now taking its full place. So the shift to the remote work is taking its place now, and so innovation will have more to do with this remote work. There's maybe a chance, which I hope, that this globalization will be strengthened by the remote work, because now people will start understanding that it's pretty easy on a virtual way to work together with people all over the world, just like we do now. I mean, I'm sitting in Belgium, in Brussels. You're sitting in Thailand. Some people are listening here from whatever place it would be in the world. So the remote work will have a major impact and bring new alliances.
What impact then does this have on psychological safety?
It will shift up to some extent, meaning that in the remote work, the listening becomes even more important. The rephrasing of what one says in a constructive way and in a questioning way to understand exactly what this person is intended to say will be even more important. Understanding and reading the eyes for people working together in the same environment physically, but having the mouth covered will even be more important, because the non-verbal clues that most people look at is a combination of the eye and the mouth. But when the mouth is covered, you only have the eye. So the eyes are the only feature of the human body a person cannot control. It's no coincidence, I believe, that in the Anglo-Saxon world, the most icons like show here are using both the eyes and the mouth, with the emphasis on the mouth, while in the Japanese icons, they use the eyes. And Japan is probably the most culturally and human-like controlled culture in the world. So they have an extreme high level of self-control, but one thing that never is one cannot control is the eye. So that will be more important, even understanding and reading each other, and of course interacting in a very respectful way and taking time.
So then how we ask questions is going to determine the quality of the response that we receive.
Sorry, can you repeat?
I was just saying that what will become more and more important then is it's how we ask the questions, or the quality of the questions that we ask, which will then start to determine the quality of the responses that we receive as well.
So the quality of the interaction, I would call it, including questions and answers, and the thoughtfulness of it becomes very, very important, higher importance than it was till now.
Interesting. So what is the critical element here? Because we have obviously we have psychological safety, which obviously leads to innovation, or people being more innovative, or more innovative leaders. What is it? What is let's say, how do we bridge the gap between the two? What is the missing link? What is the critical element or the catalyst that drives one to the other?
At least there's maybe not one critical element, but one of the critical elements in plural is definitely self-awareness.
What do you mean by self-awareness? What does that mean?
Self-awareness, knowing the impact that you have on other people, knowing the impact of your own style, your behavior, and knowing how you look at yourself, if that's consistent with what other people perceive. So I see here this beautiful image of a mirror on the wall. It's very important to be able to question oneself, and even more to understand why people question you. The moment that you're no longer getting the clues from other people, and especially not willing, that's most important. If you're not willing to look at yourself in a critical way and to get support from other people doing that, then of course you are really in a major risk of destroying the psychological safety.
And let me ask the $60 million question. Where can we get that awareness from?
That's a $1 trillion question indeed. At least one way, a very important way, is to get feedback in a structured way.
Okay. So how do we do that?
So let's say you can ask people individually, and in some cases it will work out, or which I prefer to do, of course, is using a 360 and then creating, let's say, first of all, analyzing the results, making a synthesis, building an action plan, and measuring the action plan later on.
Okay, let's go back. For the purpose of people who haven't been exposed to 360, let's go through how does it work? How does a 360 work in its entirety?
Well, basically, as an organization, small or big, no matter, you define exactly what you really want to see as a behavior, what you value most, and these behaviors you put into questions. These questions you use in a 360, you ask around. So the social circle is asked to give response to all these questions. And then you bring the data together, and together with a coach or a feedback giver, you discuss the outcome and you try to understand the learning from it.
I think as we discussed before, it's the discussion of the feedback in an empathetic way, which promotes psychological safety, which is probably one of the most important factors here. So how does that work? How does you mentioned before triangle feedback?
Yeah, I like to work in triangle feedback, and especially in this remote world, it's becoming more important. I've been doing it for a couple of years already. That means that so the self, the manager who asked for, or the leader asking for information from his environment, gets his report. We discuss online with the self, with the coach and myself as a feedback giver. And then, so we first create a synthesis, analysis. We analyze it in a triangle way. So we are three people. The coach is simply listening and gets only the right at the end of the session to ask additional questions. So the interaction is between the feedback giver, myself, and the self. In the second session, the synthesis, the coach gets the higher place and is part of the dialogue to understand and to find out which are the red lines that are key in the feedback. And in the next step, then the coach and the self and me as a feedback giver, we share all this information, and especially the action plan, the commitment, let's say, of the self to grow for development, the paths to grow, that is shared with the N+1 and eventual other stakeholders. It's very effective.
And this I guess you found in the past is the best way then to promote psychological safety within the organization.
Yes, because basically you respect the ownership. Discretion is key and respect is important. And all the time there is no discussion on the self as a human person, as a human being, to say a person. It's always about behaviors one wants to develop further to become more successful as a leader.
I know that you've worked extensively across Europe, the Americas, and Asia as well. From your experience, what differences have you seen in psychological safety within organizations?
Well, the hierarchical distance is way higher in Asian countries than it is in Europe, or especially in the United States. When I started working in Belgium and the Netherlands as a feedback giver, and then afterwards in training feedback givers, certifying feedback givers, I first thought that people in the Benelux, they were very sensitive. Then I did work in the United States, and I found the same. So people really are sensitive in the United States too. And then I came to Asia to work in India and other countries, and they are sensitive too. But what made people accept the message was, let's say, the respect for ownership. So the data are only shared with the self and the coach. And then the next step, what the manager or the self or the leader is committing to grow to, that has to be shared with the organization, with the N+1. And if you respect in the different steps, there are several steps to take. Every step, if you respect the commitments made, the ownership and discretion, then it's a perfect tool. It came from the West, but it's perfect to use it in the East, and I get a lot of appreciation in the East also. So it's not, it's just human.
It's so basically this is just human behavior.
Exactly. People want to grow, and the people around you, when they know that and they see that you want to grow, most of the time, people around you are supportive in your growth.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Lieven, I've taken up more than your time, more of your time than I should have done. I want to say, obviously, thank you very much for giving us such an insight into psychological safety and its impact on innovation today. Before we go though, before we end this session, what I want to do is open the floor up for anyone to ask any questions they have. We do have an active Q&A session for Lieven, and if you'd like to, you can either submit a question through the chat, or alternatively, you can submit a question directly by unmuting your microphone and asking. Does anyone have a question for us today? I'll give it 5. I'll give it 4, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please give me a huge round of applause for Mr. Lieven Cornelis. Crowd goes wild. And all of his insights today. Lieven, thank you very much for joining us. I do appreciate you spending your mornings with us all the way from Belgium. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Okay, bye David, bye all.
Well, I know that we have more discussion points planned for the future. We'll have one in the next couple of weeks, so I'm sure I'm going to invite everyone to come back and join us for that. Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, at Iron Mindsets, we're here to help you. We want to make sure that you have the best tools and resources available to you to help you create things like psychological safety within your organizations, to help build innovation, and obviously to innovate for the next normal. We're in the new normal right now. Let's start thinking about the future, how we can grow and how we can do it more effectively as well. So please reach out, and I'll be sending each and every one of you who attended a copy of this session, so you can go back and review it again. If you have any questions, please do visit us at ironmindsets.com. You can contact me directly, david@ironmindsets.com, or my phone number is on the screen as well. I welcome any comments, questions, ideas, thoughts that you have, and I'm really looking forward to welcoming you to our next session. Thank you all very, very much for joining us today, and I look forward to hearing about you staying healthy, developing your psychological safety, and growing for the future. So, ladies and gentlemen, please finally join me in thanking Mr. Lieven Cornelis.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good job, Lieven. And thank you all very much for spending your afternoon with me as well. I look forward to meeting you all very, very soon. Take care. Be well.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you soon. Okay. All right. Take care now.